The afternoon sun at Oak Ridge Academy cast gentle shadows across the marble ramps, painting the courtyard in hues of gold and amber. The ancient oak trees stood sentinel around the campus, their leaves rustling in the soft breeze that carried the laughter of students and the distant hum of afternoon classes. It was a scene of perfect tranquility, the kind that expensive private schools were built to provide, a sanctuary where the children of the wealthy could learn without the harsh intrusions of the outside world. In the midst of this carefully curated piece, a solitary figure moved with methodical precision. He was hunched over slightly, his weathered hands gripping a mop handle worn smooth by years of use. A dented metal bucket sat beside him, filled with soapy water that caught the afternoon light. His uniform was simple, dark blue work pants, a matching shirt with Oak Ridge maintenance embroidered on the pocket, and sturdy boots that had seen better days. His face bore the lines of experience, creased around the eyes and mouth in a way that suggested a man who had seen much but said little. Everyone at Oak Ridge Academy knew him simply as Mr. Cole, just the janitor, the invisible man who cleaned their messes, emptied their trash bins, and ensured the pristine campus remained spotless. Students walked past him without a second glance. Teachers offered perfunctory nods if they acknowledged him at all. To the world of Oak Ridge Academy, he was furniture, necessary perhaps, but certainly not worthy of real attention. But no one knew the truth. No one suspected that the man pushing that mop across their floors was Ibrahim Traore, the president of Burkina Faso. For the past 6 weeks, he had lived in this disguise, working as a janitor, observing how people treated those they considered beneath them. It was an experiment in humanity, a test of character that he had designed himself after years of watching power corrupt and privilege blind. Ibrahim had built his reputation on understanding people. As a military leader, he had learned that the best intelligence came not from reports and briefings, but from walking among his soldiers, listening to their conversations, understanding their fears and hopes. When he assumed the presidency, he had continued this practice, often visiting villages and towns in plain clothes, speaking with ordinary citizens to understand the real challenges facing his nation. But this mission was different. This time, he had traveled halfway across the world to one of America's most prestigious private schools. He wanted to see how the wealthy elite treated those they perceived as servants. He wanted to understand the dynamics of privilege and service, respect and contempt, in an environment where wealth was abundant but character remained untested. His eyes, though, those eyes held secrets. They were the eyes of a man who had commanded troops in battle, who had made decisions that affected millions, who had stared down warlords and politicians with equal composure. They were the eyes of someone who had seen death and poverty, triumph and betrayal. But here, in the halls of Oak Ridge Academy, those eyes remained downcast, observing everything while revealing nothing. Ibrahim paused in his work, straightening his back with a slight wince. The physical labor was harder than he had anticipated. His body, though strong and disciplined from years of military training, was more accustomed to reviewing troops than mopping floors. But he had committed to authenticity in this role. If he was going to understand the life of a janitor, he would live it completely, with all its aches and indignities. He glanced around the courtyard. A group of students lounged near the fountain, their designer backpacks casually tossed aside, $1,000 smartphones glinting in their hands. They laughed about weekend plans, ski trips to Aspen, shopping in Manhattan, galas at their parents' country clubs. Not one of them looked his way, though he stood less than 20 feet away. This, Ibrahim thought, was the real education. Not the one happening in classrooms, but the one happening in these small moments of unconscious cruelty. The casual way privilege made people blind. The ease with which wealth erected invisible walls between human beings. He returned to his work, moving his mop in steady, rhythmic strokes. The marble gleamed under his attention, each section becoming pristine before he moved to the next. There was something meditative about the work he had discovered, something honest about labor that produced visible results. In politics, outcomes were always ambiguous, success always debatable. But a clean floor, that was undeniable. The scream shattered the afternoon peace, like glass breaking in a cathedral. "Someone help, SHE slipping." The desperation in that voice cut through every conversation, stopped every movement. Heads snapped toward the sound, eyes widening in horror at the scene unfolding on the main ramp. A wheelchair was rolling backward down the steep marble incline, picking up speed with every second. In it sat Lily Hartman, a 16-year-old girl whose legs had been paralyzed since a car accident 3 years earlier. Her face was frozen in terror, her hands desperately clutching at the wheels, trying to slow the momentum. But the angle was too steep, the speed too great. Her textbooks flew from her lap like panicked birds, pages fluttering as they scattered across the ramp. The wheelchair was heading straight for the edge where the ramp met the courtyard at a sharp drop. At this speed, it would flip. Lily would be thrown forward onto the unforgiving marble, her head likely to strike the stone fountain or the concrete planters. The potential for catastrophic injury, or worse, was horrifyingly clear to everyone watching. Students froze in shock. Teachers stood paralyzed, mouths open, minds unable to process what was happening quickly enough to react. A few people started moving, but they were too far away, their responses too slow. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously, the way it does in moments of crisis when every second feels like an eternity but passes in a heartbeat. Samuel Hartman, Lily's father, was in a meeting downtown when his phone began vibrating with emergency calls from the school. He wouldn't know what had happened until it was already over, one way or another. Ibrahim saw everything. He had been cleaning near the base of the ramp, his back to the slope as he worked on a particularly stubborn stain. But military training had given him senses tuned to danger. The moment Lily's friend's scream pierced the air, Ibrahim's head snapped up. His eyes took in the scene with the rapid assessment of a battlefield commander, the angle of the slope, the speed of the wheelchair, the distance he would need to cover, the trajectory of the impending disaster. He didn't think. Thinking took time, and time was the one thing Lily didn't have. Ibrahim dropped his mop. The handle clattered against the marble with a sound like a starting gun. He kicked his bucket aside, soapy water sloshing over its rim, and then he ran. People who witnessed it later said they had never seen anyone move that fast. Ibrahim's legs pumped with the explosive power of a sprinter, but his movement had the controlled precision of someone who had spent years training for exactly this kind of split-second response. His work boots pounded against the marble, each step calculated for maximum purchase on the slick surface. He covered 30 feet in less than 4 seconds, his body angling toward the intercept point where the wheelchair would reach the edge of the ramp. The wheelchair was careening now, Lily's terrified scream echoing off the academy walls. The front wheels lifted slightly as the chair hit a bump in the marble, threatening to tip forward even before reaching the drop. Ibrahim launched himself forward in the last 3 feet, his hands extending toward the wheelchair's handles. His right foot skidded on the marble, his boot heel smoking from the friction as he fought to maintain control. His fingers closed around the handles just as the wheelchair's front wheels went airborne over the edge. The force of the wheelchair's momentum nearly tore Ibrahim's shoulders from their sockets. His boots skidded backward across the marble, squealing like tires on asphalt. The muscles in his arms, shoulders, and back strained to their absolute limit, every fiber engaged in stopping several 100 pounds of combined weight from plunging forward. His jaw clenched so hard he thought his teeth might crack. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, it seemed like physics would win. The wheelchair continued its forward motion, Ibrahim's boots unable to find purchase. His mind flashed through scenarios. Let go and try to catch Lily's body instead, or hold on and risk going over the edge with her. But then his military training kicked in at a deeper level. Ibrahim shifted his weight backward, using his body as a counterbalance. He turned the wheelchair slightly to the right, changing the angle of momentum. His left boot found a seam in the marble, giving him just enough traction. He pulled with everything he had, roaring with exertion, his face contorted with effort. The wheelchair stopped. For a heartbeat, it teetered on the edge, perfectly balanced between disaster and safety. Then, slowly, Ibrahim pulled it backward, away from the precipice, back onto level ground. The front wheels settled on the marble with a soft thump that sounded like the quietest miracle. The entire incident had taken less than 15 seconds. Ibrahim stood there, breathing hard, his hands still gripping the wheelchair handles. His uniform shirt was dark with sweat. His forearms bore fresh scratches from where he had scraped against the wheelchair's metal frame. A vein throbbed in his temple. Lily sat frozen, her face pale, tears streaming down her cheek. Her hands were shaking so violently that she couldn't seem to control them. She tried to speak, but only a strangled sob emerged. Ibrahim released the handles and moved around to face her. He knelt down so that he was at eye level with the girl, his breathing still heavy but his voice soft and steady. "You're safe," he said gently, his accent barely noticeable. "Just breathe slowly in and out. You're okay now." His tone was so calm, so reassuring, that Lily found herself automatically following his instructions. She drew a shaky breath, then another. The terror in her eyes began to recede, replaced by something like wonder. Around them, the courtyard remained silent. No one moved. No one spoke. They were all still processing what they had just witnessed. The janitor, the invisible man, had just performed an act of extraordinary heroism while everyone else stood frozen. Then, like a dam breaking, sound rushed back into the world. Students began talking all at once, their voices high with shock and excitement. Teachers rushed forward, suddenly animated, their earlier paralysis giving way to bustling concern. The school nurse came running from her office, first aid kit in hand. But Ibrahim had already stepped back, returning to the periphery where janitors belonged. He picked up his mop with hands that barely trembled despite the adrenaline still coursing through his system. He had spent decades training to remain calm in crisis, to control his body's fear response. It was second nature now. As the crowd swelled around Lily, checking on her, praising God for her safety, Ibrahim quietly made his way back to his bucket. He resumed cleaning the marble, working methodically, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But his heart was pounding, and in his mind he was already analyzing what this moment had revealed about the school, about privilege, about the instinctive hierarchy that determined who acted and who froze. He had learned something important today. The question was, had anyone else? The screech of expensive tires on pavement announced Samuel Hartman's arrival 15 minutes after the incident. His black Mercedes S-Class came to an abrupt stop at the academy's front entrance, parking diagonally across two visitor spaces in a way that spoke of panic overriding his usual concern for propriety. Samuel Hartman was a man who commanded attention. At 52, he was in his prime, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver threading through his dark hair in a way that magazines called distinguished. His suit was bespoke Brioni, his shoes handmade Italian leather, his watch a Patek Philippe that cost more than most people earned in a year. He had built his fortune in commercial real estate development, turning struggling properties into luxury destinations. In business, he was known as ruthless but fair, aggressive but honorable. In life, he was known as wealthy, powerful, and utterly convinced of his place at the top of any hierarchy. He burst through the school's main doors like a man possessed, his face pale beneath his tan. "Lily," he called out, his voice cracking in a way that betrayed the terror beneath his usual composure. "Where's my daughter?" The school secretary rushed to intercept him, trying to explain that Lily was fine, perfectly safe, being checked by the nurse as a precaution. But Samuel wasn't listening. He strode down the hallway toward the nurse's office, his leather soles clicking sharply against the marble floors. He found Lily in the examination room, sitting in her wheelchair, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders despite the warm day. The school nurse was checking her blood pressure while Principal Morrison stood nearby, wringing her hands and murmuring reassurances. "Dad," Lily's face crumpled when she saw him, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. The shock was still there, the residual terror of those seconds when death had seemed certain. Samuel dropped to his knees beside her wheelchair, pulling her into his arms with a tenderness that contradicted his usual controlled demeanor. "Oh God, Lily," he breathed into her hair. "I came as soon as I heard. Are you hurt? Did you hit your head? Tell me you're okay." "I'm okay," Lily whispered, clinging to him. "I'm okay because of Mr. Cole." Samuel pulled back, confusion flickering across his face. "Who?" "The janitor," Principal Morrison interjected, her voice carrying a note of something between embarrassment and awe. "Mr. Cole, one of our maintenance staff, Mr. Hartman, I don't know how to express this adequately, but that man saved your daughter's life. Everyone else froze, myself included, I'm ashamed to say, but he acted instantly. His response was absolutely extraordinary." Samuel stood, his business mind already working through the implications. "Where is he? This Mr. Cole?" "I believe he returned to his duties," the principal said, consulting with the nurse with a glance. "He didn't stay for any acknowledgement, very hum." "Lament." "Find him," Samuel ordered, his tone brooking no argument. "Bring him here, I need to—" He paused, seeming uncertain for perhaps the first time in his adult life. "I need to thank him." But when a teacher was dispatched to find Ibrahim, she returned with an embarrassed expression. "He says he's in the middle of cleaning the science wing, sir. He said if Mr. Hartman wants to speak with him, he can find him there." Samuel's jaw tightened. The man had saved his daughter's life, and he couldn't even be bothered to come when summoned. Part of Samuel recognized the irrationality of this response. The man was working, after all. But another part, the part shaped by decades of deference and privilege, bristled at what felt like disrespect. He found Ibrahim in the science wing, methodically mopping the floor outside the chemistry lab. The janitor's uniform was still stained with sweat from his earlier exertion, and Samuel could see scratches on his forearms where the wheelchair's metal frame had scraped the skin. "Mr. Cole." Ibrahim looked up, his expression neutral. "Mr. Hartman," he acknowledged with a slight nod, but he didn't stop mopping. Samuel was accustomed to people stopping what they were doing when he entered a room. The fact that this janitor continued working struck him as either admirably dedicated or remarkably rude. He couldn't quite decide which. "I want to thank you," Samuel began, his voice stiff, "for what you did today. My daughter, she means everything to me if something had happened to her." "But nothing did happen," Ibrahim said simply, his accent giving his words a different cadence than the American English Samuel was used to. "She's safe. That's what matters." Samuel reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew his checkbook. Yes, he still carried one, a habit from an earlier era that he'd never abandoned. "I'd like to show my appreciation. Money can't repay what you've done, but I'd like to offer you something substantial, $50,000, or more if you think that's—" "No, thank you," Ibrahim interrupted, still mopping. "I don't want money for this." Samuel stood there, checkbook in hand, completely thrown. In his experience, everyone wanted money. Everyone had a price. The fact that this janitor was refusing what was, admittedly, likely several years of his salary made no sense. You have to understand, I need to do something," Samuel said, and there was genuine distress in his voice now. "You saved my daughter's life. I can't just walk away without acknowledging that." Ibrahim finally stopped mopping. He straightened, meeting Samuel's eyes for the first time. The intensity in the janitor's gaze startled Samuel. There was a depth there, a weight of experience that seemed incongruous with his humble station. "If you want to do something," Ibrahim said slowly, "then see the people around you, really see them. Not just the ones who wear expensive suits or sit in important offices. See the people who clean your buildings, who serve your food, who maintain the world you move through. Acknowledge their humanity. That would be worth more than any check." The words hung in the air between them, profound and challenging. Samuel felt something shift inside him, a small crack in the armor of his certainty, a hairline fracture in his understanding of the world. You're not like other people," Samuel said finally. Ibrahim smiled slightly. "I'm exactly like other people, you just don't usually notice us." He returned to his mopping, and after a moment, Samuel turned and walked away. But the janitor's words followed him down the hallway, echoing in his mind with uncomfortable persistence. 3 days passed. 3 days during which Samuel Hartman found himself thinking about the janitor more than he cared to admit. The man had gotten under his skin, challenged his worldview in a way that was both uncomfortable and strangely compelling. Lily wouldn't stop talking about Mr. Cole. At dinner, during their evening routines, in random moments throughout the day, she would bring him up. "Dad, did you know that Mr. Cole used to be in the military? One of the teachers told me. That explains how he moved so fast." Or, "I saw Mr. Cole today and he asked how I was doing." Really asked, like he genuinely cared, not like most people who just ask out of politeness. Finally, on the third evening, as Samuel sat in his study reviewing acquisition proposals, Lily wheeled herself into the room with that determined expression he had learned to recognize. "Dad, you need to invite Mr. Cole to dinner." Samuel looked up from his papers. "What?" "You heard me. Invite him to dinner. A proper dinner here at the house. I want to thank him properly, and I want you to actually talk to him. Really talk, not just throw money at him and walk away." "Lily, I tried to thank him. He refused my check." "Because money isn't what he wants." Lily's voice rose with frustration. "Dad, when was the last time you actually had a conversation with someone who wasn't trying to get something from you? Someone who doesn't care about your money or your connections. Mr. Cole is different. I can tell. And I think you need to see that." Samuel started to object, to explain all the reasons why inviting a janitor to dinner at their home was inappropriate, but the words died in his throat. His daughter looked at him with such hope, such earnest conviction, that he found himself unable to deny her. "Fine," he said, surprising himself. "I'll invite him." The next day, Samuel returned to Oak Ridge Academy. He found Ibrahim in the courtyard, trimming hedges with the same methodical precision he brought to all his work. "Mr. Cole, I wonder if I could have a word." Ibrahim set down his hedge trimmers and gave Samuel his full attention. "Of course." "My daughter, Lily, she wants to properly thank you for what you did. She's asked me to invite you to dinner at our home. This evening, if you're available. I know it's short notice, but—" Samuel trailed off, realizing he was actually nervous. When was the last time he'd been nervous about anything social? Ibrahim studied him for a long moment, and Samuel had the uncomfortable feeling of being assessed and measured by a standard he didn't understand. "What time?" Ibrahim asked finally. 7 o'clock. I can send a car for you if—" "I'll find my way," Ibrahim said. "Thank you for the invitation." That evening, the Hartman mansion was ablaze with light. The house was a masterpiece of modern architecture, all clean lines, soaring windows, and carefully curated art. It sat on 3 acres in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city, worth somewhere north of $15 million. Everything about it spoke of wealth, taste, and privilege. When the doorbell rang at precisely 7 o'clock, Samuel felt an odd flutter of nerves. He had hosted senators, CEOs, celebrities at this house without a second thought. Why should a janitor make him nervous? He opened the door himself, having dismissed the household staff for the evening. Lily had insisted. She wanted this to be personal, not performative. Ibrahim stood on the doorstep in clean but clearly inexpensive clothes, khaki pants, a simple button-down shirt, worn but polished shoes. His appearance was neat but made no attempt to match the grandeur of his surroundings. He looked exactly like what he was, a working man invited to a rich man's home. "Mr. Cole, thank you for coming. Please come in." Ibrahim stepped inside, and if he was impressed or intimidated by the mansion's opulence, he gave no sign. He simply looked around with mild interest, the way one might observe any new environment. "Mr. Cole," Lily's voice echoed from the dining room, bright with genuine pleasure. She wheeled herself into the foyer, and her smile was so radiant that both men couldn't help but smile in return. "Miss Lily," Ibrahim said warmly, moving forward to meet her. "It's good to see you looking so well." "Thanks to you," she said, and there was no artifice in her gratitude, no performative emotion, just honest appreciation. They moved to the dining room where a simple meal had been set, simple by Hartman standards anyway. No 15-course tasting menu, no wine pairings or molecular gastronomy, just good food, well prepared. Lily had insisted on this too. As they sat down, Samuel found himself in unfamiliar territory. Usually, dinner conversations revolved around business or politics or society gossip. But here, with this janitor sitting at his table, none of his usual conversational gambits seemed appropriate. It was Lily who broke the ice. "Mr. Cole, Dad mentioned you were in the military. Where did you serve?" Ibrahim took a sip of water before responding. "West Africa primarily. I served for 12 years. "That must have been difficult," Lily said softly. "It had its challenges," Ibrahim acknowledged. "But every form of service has its difficulties. The key is understanding why you serve." "Why did you serve?" Samuel found himself asking, genuinely curious. Ibrahim met his eyes. "Because my country needed people willing to sacrifice for something larger than themselves. Because leadership means being willing to go first into the difficult places, to face what others fear. Because service, real service, is the highest calling of humanity." The words were simple, but the way Ibrahim said them carried a weight that made Samuel sit up straighter. This was not the way janitors typically spoke. Hell, this wasn't the way most people spoke. There was a gravity to Ibrahim's words, a sense of deep conviction earned through hard experience. "You said leadership," Samuel observed. "Were you an officer?" "I held various positions of responsibility," Ibrahim said, which was technically true while revealing nothing. The conversation flowed more easily after that. Ibrahim asked thoughtful questions about Samuel's business, showing genuine interest in the strategies of real estate development. He spoke with Lily about her studies, offering insights on history and geography that revealed a much broader education than his current position suggested. He was courteous but not deferential, intelligent but not showy, present but not imposing. As the evening progressed, Samuel found himself increasingly puzzled. Everything about Ibrahim suggested a man of substance, of experience, of depth. How had such a person ended up pushing a mop at a private academy? "Mr. Cole, may I ask you something personal?" Samuel said as they finished their meal. "Of course. You're clearly educated, clearly capable. You saved my daughter's life with a physical prowess and quick thinking that most people don't possess. You speak about service and leadership with the conviction of someone who has lived those principles. So why?" Samuel paused, trying to find a polite way to phrase the question. "Why are you working as a janitor?" Ibrahim smiled, and there was something knowing in that smile, something almost amused. "Perhaps I'm exactly where I need to be, Mr. Hartman. Perhaps I'm learning something I couldn't learn any other way." "Learning what?" "How people reveal their true character when they think no one important is watching." The answer landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through Samuel's consciousness. He felt exposed, seen in a way that was deeply uncomfortable, because he knew in that moment that Ibrahim was absolutely right. Samuel had revealed his character and how he treated the invisible people in his life, with polite indifference at best, with dismissive arrogance at worst. "I think," Ibrahim continued gently, "that we live in a world where people have forgotten a fundamental truth, that every human being has inherent dignity and worth, regardless of their position or possessions. We've created hierarchies that let us pretend some people matter more than others. But in the moments that truly count, when a girl is about to be hurt, when someone needs help, when crisis strikes, those hierarchies dissolve. We're just humans helping humans, or failing to." Lily was watching her father's face, seeing the impact of Ibrahim's words. Samuel looked shaken, his usual confidence faltering. "You're making me feel like I've been living my life wrong," Samuel said, and there was no defensiveness in his voice now, just honest vulnerability. "Not wrong," Ibrahim corrected. "Just incomplete. You've succeeded in business, you've provided for your daughter, you've built an impressive life. But success without character is hollow, Mr. Hartman. Wealth without compassion is empty. Power without service is just tyranny in a nicer suit." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of those words settling over the room like snow. "How did you become so wise?" Lily asked softly. Ibrahim's expression grew distant, as if he were looking at memories that existed far from this elegant dining room. "I've seen what happens when leaders forget they're human. I've seen what happens when power becomes its own purpose. I've seen people die for no reason other than someone else's pride or greed. Those experiences teach you what matters, if you're willing to learn." As the evening drew to a close and Ibrahim prepared to leave, Samuel walked him to the door. On the threshold, he extended his hand for a handshake, but found himself pulling Ibrahim into an embrace instead, awkward, unpracticed, but sincere. "Thank you," Samuel said quietly, "not just for saving Lily for this evening, for seeing me clearly enough to tell me what I needed to hear." Ibrahim smiled. "That's what friends do, Mr. Hartman." "Samuel," he corrected. "Please call me Samuel." "Then you should call me Ibrahim." As Ibrahim walked down the driveway toward his modest car, Samuel stood in the doorway, watching. Lily wheeled up beside him, and together they watched the janitor drive away. "He's not just a janitor, is he, Dad?" Lily said. "No," Samuel agreed. "I don't think he is. I don't know what he is, but he's definitely not just a janitor." Inside the house, Samuel found himself unable to sleep. He sat in his study, staring at the city lights, replaying the evening's conversations in his mind. Ibrahim's words had planted seeds of change, and Samuel could feel them taking root, beginning to grow, starting to transform the landscape of his understanding. For the first time in his adult life, Samuel Hartman wondered if he had been measuring success by the wrong standards. The next morning, Samuel woke with unusual clarity. The seeds planted by Ibrahim's words had germinated overnight, and Samuel found himself seeing the world differently. When his housekeeper brought his morning coffee, he thanked her by name, Maria, and asked about her daughter's soccer game. The look of surprised pleasure on her face made him realize he had never bothered to ask before. During his morning drive to his office, instead of making phone calls, Samuel found himself thinking, really thinking, perhaps for the first time in years, about what kind of man he wanted to be versus what kind of man he had become. By the time he reached his downtown office, a decision had crystallized. He called Oak Ridge Academy and asked to speak with Principal Morrison. "This is unusual, Mr. Hartman, but of course we can accommodate you," Principal Morrison said when he made his request. The morning assembly is at 9 o'clock. Samuel cleared his schedule, something he never did, and drove back to the academy. When he arrived, he asked that no announcement be made about his presence. He wanted to see Ibrahim first, to speak with him before the assembly. He found the janitor in the hallway outside the auditorium, organizing his cleaning supplies for the day's work. "Ibrahim," Samuel said, using his first name for the first time. Ibrahim looked up, and if he was surprised to see Samuel at the academy so early, he didn't show it. "Samuel, good morning." "I need to do something," Samuel said without preamble. "I need to do it publicly, and I need your permission first." Ibrahim set down the bottles of cleaning solution he'd been arranging and gave Samuel his full attention. "I want to acknowledge you at the morning assembly in front of the entire school. I want everyone to know what you did, and I want them to see me thanking you properly. I want—" Samuel paused, choosing his words carefully. "I want to use my privilege for something good, to show these students that heroism and character don't require wealth or status, that sometimes the most important people are the ones we've been trained to overlook." Ibrahim studied him for a long moment. "You understand this will change things for me here? Right now, I'm invisible, which allows me to see people as they really are. If you do this, that invisibility ends." "I know," Samuel said, "and if you'd rather I didn't, I won't. But Ibrahim, I spent all night thinking about what you said, about character and service and seeing people's humanity. And I realized I've been part of the problem my whole life. I want to be part of the solution instead. I want to start modeling something different for my daughter, for these students, for myself." A smile spread slowly across Ibrahim's face. "Then I give you permission." The auditorium was packed with students and faculty for the morning assembly. Principal Morrison was beginning her usual announcements about upcoming events and school business when Samuel entered from the side door. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Samuel Hartman was one of the school's largest donors, but he rarely attended regular school functions. Principal Morrison paused mid-sentence, uncertain. Samuel made his way to the stage, and after a moment's hesitation, she stepped aside and handed him the microphone. "Good morning," Samuel began, his voice carrying across the packed auditorium. "I'm Samuel Hartman, and I'm here this morning because I need to tell you all something important. 3 days ago, my daughter was in terrible danger on the campus ramp. Her wheelchair was rolling backward, out of control, heading toward what could have been a fatal accident." The room had gone completely silent. Every eye was on Samuel. "Everyone froze," Samuel continued. "Teachers, students, everyone, myself included, because I wasn't here, but I know that if I had been, I would have frozen too, just like everyone else. Everyone except one person, a man who didn't freeze, a man who acted with courage and speed and selflessness, a man who saved my daughter's life." Samuel paused, letting his words sink in. "That man is Mr. Ibrahim Cole, a member of our custodial staff." He gestured to the side of the auditorium where Ibrahim stood, still in his janitor's uniform, still holding a cleaning rag. Heads turned. Students who had walked past Ibrahim 1,000 times without seeing him now stared at him with newfound attention. "I came here today to do something I should have done immediately," Samuel said, and his voice cracked slightly with emotion. "I came to say thank you, publicly, properly, because Ibrahim Cole deserves more than a private handshake or a check written behind closed doors. He deserves acknowledgement, he deserves recognition, he deserves respect." Samuel stepped away from the microphone and walked to where Ibrahim stood. The janitor set down his cleaning supplies and met Samuel halfway. They stood facing each other while the entire school watched. "Thank you," Samuel said, his voice breaking. "Thank you for my daughter's life. Thank you for showing me what real courage looks like. Thank you for reminding me that character has nothing to do with status or wealth and everything to do with how you act when someone needs help." Then Samuel Hartman, businessman, millionaire, pillar of the community, did something he had never done in his adult life. He bowed, not a small nod, but a full, deep bow of profound respect. The auditorium erupted. Students rose to their feet, applauding wildly. Teachers joined them, tears streaming down many faces. The noise was thunderous, overwhelming, cathartic. It wasn't just applause for Ibrahim's heroism. It was applause for this moment of genuine humanity, for Samuel's public display of humility, for the breaking down of invisible barriers that everyone had known existed but no one had dared to challenge. Ibrahim stood there, accepting the recognition with grace but without false modesty. He had not sought attention, but he wouldn't insult the moment by pretending it didn't matter. When the applause finally died down, Samuel returned to the microphone. I'm also announcing today the establishment of the Ibrahim Cole Scholarship for Character and Service. This scholarship will be awarded annually to the student who best demonstrates these qualities, not academic excellence or athletic achievement, though those matter too, but specifically character and service to others. Because I've learned, thanks to this man, that these are the qualities that actually matter in life. More applause, even louder this time. Samuel had to wait a full minute before he could speak again. And one more thing, Samuel said, his voice stronger now, more certain. I'm challenging every person in this room, students, faculty, staff, and especially myself, to really see each other, to recognize the humanity and dignity in every person we encounter. Not just the people who seem important by society's arbitrary standards, but everyone. The janitors, the cafeteria workers, the security guards, the administrative staff. Everyone. Because they're not just roles or functions. They're people with stories, with wisdom, with value that has nothing to do with their job titles. He looked directly at Ibrahim. This man taught me that in one evening. It's a lesson I should have learned 50 years ago, but I'm grateful I learned it now before it was too late. The assembly ended with students and faculty lining up to thank Ibrahim personally, to shake his hand, to apologize for overlooking him. Ibrahim accepted each interaction with grace, speaking briefly with students who were suddenly seeing their janitor as a human being for the first time. Lily waited until the crowd had thinned before approaching. Mr. Cole, Ibrahim, thank you isn't big enough for what you did. You didn't just save my life, you saved my dad too. Ibrahim smiled gently. Your father saved himself, Lily. I just held up a mirror, the courage to look into it and see the truth. That was all him. 2 weeks passed, and life at Oak Ridge Academy settled into a new rhythm. Ibrahim continued his janitorial duties, but now students greeted him by name. Teachers stopped to chat with him. The invisible barriers had begun to crumble, and something more humane was emerging in their place. Samuel visited the academy frequently now, often bringing coffee to share with Ibrahim during breaks. They had become unlikely friends, the millionaire and the janitor, talking about philosophy, leadership, service, and life. Samuel found himself learning more from these conversations than from any business school or management seminar he had ever attended. But Ibrahim knew his time in disguise was coming to an end. His security detail in Burkina Faso had been sending increasingly urgent messages. Political tensions were rising, and his extended absence was creating instability. The experiment had been successful, perhaps too successful, and now reality was demanding his return. On a Tuesday morning, as Ibrahim was cleaning the main hallway, he noticed an unusual commotion outside. Black SUVs with diplomatic plates were pulling up to the school's entrance. His security chief had mentioned they might be coming soon, but he hadn't expected it to be today. He continued mopping, watching through the windows as official-looking men in dark suits emerged from the vehicles. Several carried the green, red, and yellow flag of Burkina Faso. Ibrahim's pulse quickened slightly, not with fear, but with the recognition that his two worlds were about to collide. Principal Morrison emerged from her office, looking confused and somewhat alarmed. A tall man in a formal military uniform approached her, speaking rapidly in French. Morrison's expression shifted from confusion to shock to disbelief in the span of seconds. Students pressed against classroom windows, trying to see what was happening. Teachers stepped into the hallways. Even the usually unflappable administrative staff looked rattled. The man in uniform entered the building, followed by several others. They moved with purpose, scanning the hallways until their eyes landed on Ibrahim. The lead officer's face broke into a wide smile, and he snapped to attention, delivering a sharp military salute. Monsieur le Président, he said loudly, his voice echoing through the hallway. Your presence is requested back home. The mission has exceeded expectations, but your country. Why needs you? The hallway, which had been filled with whispers and speculation, went completely silent. Ibrahim set down his mop carefully, straightened his uniform shirt, and returned the salute with military precision. Then he smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. Colonel Ouedraogo, he said, I was hoping for another week, but I understand the necessity. President, Principal Morrison's voice was barely a whisper. President. The military officer turned to her. Yes, Madam Principal, You have had the extraordinary honor of hosting President Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso for the past 6 weeks. He has been conducting let's call it a field study on social dynamics and human behavior. Students began spilling out of classrooms despite teachers' protests. Word was spreading like wildfire through the school. The janitor was a president. An actual head of state had been mopping their floors. Samuel Hartman received the phone call from Principal Morrison while he was in a meeting. He excused himself, listened to her stammering explanation, and found himself laughing, actually laughing, with a mixture of shock, amusement, and dawning understanding. "Of course he is," Samuel said aloud to himself as he drove to the academy. "Of course he's a president. That explains everything." By the time Samuel arrived, the main hallway had become an impromptu gathering place. Students lined the walls, teachers stood in doorways, and Ibrahim, still in his janitor's uniform, stood in the center, surrounded by his security detail, calmly explaining himself. "I wanted to understand something," Ibrahim was saying to the assembled crowd. "I wanted to see how people treat those they perceive as beneath them, how character reveals itself when people think no one important is watching. I wanted to learn these things firsthand, not through reports or briefings." "But why here?" a student asked. "Why an American private school?" "Because privilege and power are the same everywhere," Ibrahim replied. "The specifics change, but the fundamental dynamics remain constant. And because private schools like this one are where many future leaders are educated. I wanted to see what values they were learning, not just in classrooms, but in how they treated the people who served them." Samuel pushed through the crowd until he stood face to face with Ibrahim. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Samuel started laughing, deep, genuine laughter that seemed to release weeks of tension. "A president," Samuel said, shaking his head. "I invited a president to my house for dinner and served him pot roast." Ibrahim laughed too. "It was excellent pot roast, Samuel. I tried to give you a check for $50,000. And I would have refused it no matter who I was." They embraced, and this time there was no awkwardness, just genuine affection between friends. "You could have told me," Samuel said. "If I had told you, you would have treated me differently. You wouldn't have shown me your true self, and then I wouldn't have had the privilege of watching you grow into a better version of that self." Samuel nodded, understanding. This whole thing, it was a test. "No," Ibrahim corrected gently. "It was a mirror. Tests have right and wrong answers. Mirrors just show you what's there. What you do with what you see, that's up to you." Lily arrived with her nurse attendant, having been rushed to the school as soon as the news broke. She wheeled herself through the crowd, her face a mixture of shock and delight. "You're a president," she said to Ibrahim, her voice filled with wonder. "I am," Ibrahim confirmed. "But I'm also still the man who caught your wheelchair. Being president doesn't change that moment, Lily. That moment was just human helping human. Position and title are irrelevant when someone needs help." "But you risked yourself," Lily protested. "If you had been injured, it would have been an international incident. Your whole country depends on you." Ibrahim knelt down beside her wheelchair, just as he had on that first day. "Lily, if I had let you fall because I was worried about my own safety or political consequences, I would not have been worthy of leading anyone. Leadership means being willing to sacrifice for others, always, without hesitation." The crowd around them had gone quiet, listening to every word. These were students who would one day be leaders themselves, in business, politics, medicine, law. What they were witnessing was a masterclass in authentic leadership, taught by someone who had actually lived it. Principal Morrison approached nervously. "Mr. President, I must apologize for any disrespect you may have experienced here, if we had known." Ibrahim stood and held up a hand, stopping her. "Principal Morrison, please don't apologize. If everyone had known who I was, the entire experiment would have been pointless. And besides," he looked around at the assembled students and staff, "I was not universally respected here. Some people saw me as a human being regardless of my job title. Some people treated me with kindness and courtesy. Those are the people who restored my faith in humanity." He paused, then continued. "And those who didn't, they taught me something valuable too. They showed me exactly what I'm fighting against in my own country, the casual cruelty of hierarchy, the way people use status to justify treating others as less than human. So in a way, everyone here was my teacher." A student raised her hand. a junior named Maya who had always been kind to Ibrahim, often helping him carry his cleaning supplies. "Mr. President, what will you tell people back home about America?" Ibrahim smiled at her. "I'll tell them that America, like every country, contains multitudes. I'll tell them about the people who were kind to a janitor without knowing he was anyone important. I'll tell them about a father who had the courage to change, to admit he was wrong and become better. I'll tell them about a young woman in a wheelchair who taught me that strength has nothing to do with the body and everything to do with the spirit." He gestured around the hallway. "I'll tell them that the measure of any society is not its wealth or power, but how it treats its most vulnerable members and its least visible workers. And I'll tell them that there is hope, because I saw people here begin to change, to see each other differently, to choose empathy over indifference." The next hour was a whirlwind of activity. Diplomatic protocols had to be observed. Phone calls were made to the State Department, to the Burkina Faso embassy, to security agencies. Media vans began arriving outside the school gates as word of the president's unusual undercover mission spread. But through it all, Ibrahim remained calm, taking time to speak with individuals who wanted to say goodbye. He found Maria, the cafeteria worker who had always shared kind words with him in Spanish, and thanked her for her friendship. He spoke with Robert, the elderly security guard who had treated him as an equal from day one. He said goodbye to teachers who had begun over the past 2 weeks to really see him. Samuel stayed close, still processing the revelation but feeling oddly proud. His friend was a president, but more importantly, his friend was exactly who he had seemed to be, a man of profound character and wisdom. "I have something for you," Samuel said, pulling Ibrahim aside. He handed him a letter sealed in an envelope. "Don't open it now, read it when you're on the plane home." Ibrahim accepted the envelope, sensing its importance. "Thank you, Samuel." "No, thank you, you changed my life. I was successful but empty, rich but poor in the ways that actually matter. You showed me a different path." "You showed yourself that path," Ibrahim corrected. "I just happened to be there when you were ready to see it." The military attaché approached respectfully. "Mr. President, we really must go. There's a diplomatic flight waiting at the airport." Ibrahim nodded. He turned to address the crowd one last time, and people pressed forward to hear his final words. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you for teaching me, for challenging me, and for showing me both the best and worst of human nature. I came here as a president pretending to be a janitor. I leave as a janitor who happens to be a president, and I think that's the right order of priorities." He picked up his mop one last time, holding it like a scepter. "This tool cleaned your floors, but more importantly, it cleaned away my illusions about power and position. It reminded me that all honest work has dignity. That service is noble regardless of its form, that the person cleaning your toilet deserves the same respect as the person running your country." He set the mop down gently, ceremoniously. "I hope some of you will remember the janitor you overlooked and think twice before overlooking someone again. I hope some of you will remember that true nobility lies not in your birth or wealth, but in your choices and character. And I hope all of you will remember that the most important people in your lives might be the ones you're not even seeing." The applause started slowly, then built to a roar. Students and teachers, administrators and staff, everyone was clapping, many crying. It was more than just farewell. It was recognition of something profound that had happened in their midst. Ibrahim walked toward the exit, his security detail surrounding him but maintaining a respectful distance. As he passed through the doorway, he paused and looked back one more time. His eyes found Samuel and Lily, and he nodded, a simple gesture of friendship and respect that transcended all titles and positions. Then President Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso walked out of Oak Ridge Academy, leaving behind a school transformed and countless lives forever changed. On the diplomatic flight back to Burkina Faso, Ibrahim finally opened Samuel's letter. It was handwritten on expensive stationery, the script careful and deliberate. "Dear Ibrahim, I don't know if presidents keep letters from millionaires, but I hope you'll keep this one. I need to say things I couldn't say properly in person. Before you came into my life, I thought I had everything figured out. I had built an empire, accumulated wealth beyond my needs, achieved every goal I had set for myself. I thought success was measured in dollars and square footage, in deals closed and competitors defeated. I thought I was a good man because I provided for my daughter, donated to charities, and maintained a reputation for honesty in business. But I wasn't a good man. I was just a successful one. And there's a vast difference that I had somehow missed. You showed me that difference. Not by lecturing me, not by judging me, but simply by being who you are. You showed me that true worth has nothing to do with net worth. That real power lies in serving others, not in being served. That dignity is inherent in every human being, not bestowed by position or possessions. When I tried to give you money, you gave me wisdom instead. When I offered you a check, you offered me a mirror. When I wanted to reward you, you taught me that some things, most things, can't be bought. I've been thinking about something you said at dinner. Character without wealth is possible. Wealth without character is just poverty in a nice suit. I was wearing a very expensive suit when you said that, and I felt naked, exposed, seen for what I truly was, rich in everything except what matters. But here's what I want you to know. You didn't just save my daughter's life that day on the ramp. You saved mine too. You pulled me back from an edge I didn't even know I was approaching. The edge where you become so disconnected from common humanity that you stop being fully human yourself. Since meeting you, I've started really seeing the people around me. Maria, my housekeeper, whose daughter is starting college next year and is terrified about the cost. I'm helping with that now. Robert, my driver, whose wife has cancer. I gave him paid leave to care for her and found her the best oncologist in the state. The barista at my usual coffee shop, the security guard in my building, the janitor in my office. I know their names now. I see them now. These small changes feel revolutionary to me. They're probably nothing to you, just normal human decency. But for me, they represent a complete transformation of how I move through the world. My daughter tells me I'm becoming a better person. I think what she means is I'm becoming an actual person, period. The version of me you met 6 weeks ago was just a machine wearing a human suit, optimized for success, empty of soul. You asked me once what I wanted to be remembered for. At the time, I didn't have a good answer. Now I do. I want to be remembered as someone who learned to see people, who learned that service is noble, that humility is strength, that character is everything. I want to be remembered as someone who was fortunate enough to meet a president disguised as a janitor and wise enough to learn from him. I don't know if our paths will cross again. You have a country to lead, and I have a lot of living to make up for. But please know this. You are one of the most important people I have ever met. Not because you're a president, but because you're exactly who you appeared to be, a man of profound integrity, courage, and compassion. Thank you for the gift of your friendship. Thank you for saving my daughter. Thank you for saving me. The janitor you knew as Mr. Cole taught me more in 6 weeks than I learned in 52 years. I hope the president known as Ibrahim Traore will remember the stubborn millionaire he met in America and know that he left that millionaire better than he found him. With profound respect and genuine friendship. Samuel Hartman. P.S. I'm starting a foundation dedicated to honoring and supporting service workers, janitors, cleaners, maintenance staff, all the people who keep our world running while remaining invisible. I'm calling it the Ibrahim Cole Foundation for Dignity in Service. I hope that's okay. If you ever doubt whether your experiment made a difference, remember this: one man's perspective changed. One man's daughter has a father who finally sees the world clearly. One man's life was transformed. That's not a small thing, that's everything. Ibrahim read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and placed it in his jacket pocket, close to his heart. He looked out the airplane window at the clouds below, thinking about the strange journey that had brought him to this moment. He had gone to America expecting to confirm what he already knew, that wealth and privilege made people callous, that power corrupted character, that the gap between rich and poor was as much about humanity as about money. And he had found evidence of all those things. But he had also found something unexpected, the capacity for change. Samuel Hartman's transformation, from arrogant millionaire to humble friend, from blind privilege to conscious awareness, proved that people could change, could grow, could become better versions of themselves when confronted with truth spoken in love. That, Ibrahim thought, was the real lesson of his experiment. Not that people were good or bad, respectful or disrespectful, worthy or unworthy, but that people were capable of change, capable of growth, capable of choosing to see each other's humanity even after years of trained blindness. 6 months after Ibrahim's departure, Oak Ridge Academy looked much the same from the outside. The marble ramps still gleamed in the afternoon sun, the oak trees still rustled in the breeze, and students still moved through their days of classes and activities. But something fundamental had shifted in the school's culture. The Ibrahim Cole Scholarship had been awarded for the first time, going not to the student with the highest grades or the most impressive extracurriculars, but to a quiet sophomore named James who had spent the entire year volunteering at a homeless shelter and tutoring elementary school students in underserved neighborhoods. His acceptance speech had moved many to tears. Mr. Cole taught us that service is its own reward. That the measure of our lives isn't what we achieve for ourselves, but what we do for others. The custodial staff now ate lunch in the faculty lounge, invited to participate in school discussions and decision-making. Students regularly volunteered to help with cleaning and maintenance, seeing it not as punishment, but as service. The invisible barriers between important and unimportant people had begun to erode. Lily had become the informal keeper of Ibrahim's legacy. She gave talks to student groups about dignity, respect, and seeing beyond social hierarchies. She had started a club called Eyes Open, dedicated to community service and breaking down class barriers. She was considering studying social justice in college, inspired by a janitor who turned out to be a president, but who taught her that the job mattered less than the character. Samuel had undergone his own transformation. He had indeed started the Ibrahim Cole Foundation for Dignity in Service, which provided scholarships, healthcare benefits, and recognition programs for service workers across the country. He still ran his real estate business, but with a different philosophy, prioritizing fair wages and good working conditions for all employees, even when it cut into profits. He had also become close friends with many of the people who had previously been invisible to him. Maria's daughter was attending college on a scholarship from Samuel's foundation. Robert had returned to work after his wife's successful cancer treatment, paid for by Samuel's insurance coverage expansion. The transformation in Samuel's life had rippled outward, affecting dozens of families directly and hundreds indirectly. One afternoon, a package arrived at the Hartman mansion. It was from Burkina Faso, marked with official government seals. Inside, Samuel found a letter from Ibrahim and a carefully wrapped object. Dear Samuel, I hope this letter finds you and Lily well. I think of you both often and follow news of your foundation with great interest and pride. You have taken the small seed I planted and grown it into something magnificent. Leadership here has been challenging, as always. Political tensions remain high, economic struggles continue, and the work of building a better nation feels endless. But I find myself approaching these challenges differently now, thanks to my time at Oak Ridge Academy. I remember what it felt like to be invisible. I remember the casual cruelty of being overlooked and the surprising warmth of being seen. These memories make me a better leader. They remind me to listen to the voices no one else is hearing, to value the contributions no one else is noticing, to serve the people no one else is seeing. I've implemented some changes here inspired by my American experiment. Government ministers now spend 1 week each year working ordinary jobs, driving taxis, cleaning streets, working in markets. It's controversial, but it's changing how our leaders see our citizens. Empathy, I've learned, must be practiced, not just preached. Inside this package, you'll find something I want you to have. It's the mop I used at Oak Ridge Academy. I asked Colonel Ouedraogo to retrieve it before we left. I know it seems like a strange gift, but I think you'll understand its significance. That mop represents the most important leadership lesson I've ever learned. That no honest work is beneath any person, no matter their position. That service is noble in all its forms. That the tools we use matter less than the spirit in which we use them. Keep it somewhere visible, Samuel. Let it remind you of who you've become and why that matters. Let it remind you that you once knew a president who cleaned floors and learned from it. Let it remind you that character is built in small acts, repeated daily, when no one important is watching. Or rather, when everyone important is watching, because everyone is important. Your friend, Ibrahim. Samuel unwrapped the mop carefully. It was worn, the handle smooth from use, the head frayed from weeks of cleaning. To anyone else, it would have looked like trash. To Samuel, it looked like a scepter, a symbol, a sacred object. He hung it on the wall of his study, right next to his diplomas and business awards. It looked absurd there, a janitor's mop among the trappings of success. But to Samuel, it was the most important thing in the room. It was a reminder of who he had been, who he had become, and who he still aspired to be. Lily saw it there during one of her visits to his study and smiled. I like it, she said simply. So do I, Samuel replied. Best piece of art I own. And it was true, because unlike his expensive paintings and sculptures, the mop told a true story. A story about dignity and transformation, about service and character, about a president who became a janitor and a millionaire who became a man. It was the story of how one person's courage to live in disguise had revealed the truth about many others. How one act of heroism had sparked a chain reaction of change. How friendship had transcended every barrier of wealth, power, and position. It was the story of Ibrahim Traore and Samuel Hartman, the janitor and the millionaire, the president and the friend. Two men from different worlds who had met in an unlikely place and learned from each other what it truly means to be human. And every time Samuel looked at that mop, he remembered, real honor has nothing to do with position. Real dignity has nothing to do with wealth. Real leadership has nothing to do with power. Real everything has to do with character. And character, as Ibrahim had taught him, is revealed not when everyone is watching, but in the quiet moments when you think no one important can see. The truth, Samuel had learned, is that someone important is always watching. That someone is you. The end.